Hello, everyone. I feel a little bit like this student that got to be the substitute teacher. The person who was supposed to be moderating today is unfortunately ill, so I volunteered to do this. Actually, I did it because I was afraid, as a panelist, I knew that I was going to be asked very hard questions, being the dinosaur in the room, right? Telcos are dinosaurs. Actually, one person that I met here this morning asked me who I worked for. I said, Deutsche Telekom. He said, isn't Deutsche Telekom out of business? It's like, no, we're still in business. And then I'm thinking, are we still in business? Because this business of telecoms is really changing. And we have on stage today several people who will represent different aspects and angles of this shifting and changing industry. And I was supposed to take the seat, I will take the seat next to Yotam from Telefonica and answer those hard questions as to our relevance and being the dumb pipe again. So luckily I get to ask the questions rather than answer them. But I will say that one of the things that we're trying to do in Deutsche Telekom, and the ones I spoke with or that have seen this session yesterday might remember that we've started an Israeli office, an Israeli operation not too long ago with the goal and with the aim of partnering with young, early-stage technology companies, either in the form of investment or in the form of strategic partnership of going jointly to the market in order to focus on innovation and not try to reinvent the wheel. Because, you know, we've been trying very hard in the telecom business not to be the dumb pipe. And guess what? It might be time for us, and I'm going to ask Yotam that later, to embrace the fact that we're a pipe. And you know what? We're not a dumb pipe, we're the damn pipe. Mm-hmm. We need to take this opportunity of delivering lots of bits from one place to another. No one else does that. Google, Apple, all those new players, they're not going to put the towers and the infrastructure to deliver those bits in a way that will serve the industry. So someone needs to do the heavy lifting. And if we leverage that in our know-how, an Israeli technology that can help improve, optimize the networks, reduce our costs, make it more relevant, and then have those other partners deliver the services on top and share some of that revenue, that might justify our existence as pipes and actually be a very lucrative business. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce my partner in crime, colleague, arch enemy, Yotam from Telefonica. Telefonica, if you do not know, is one of the largest telecom operator groups in the world, competing with Deutsche Telekom, but also collaborating on many fronts. Yotam, I think other than telling us a little bit about yourself, your background, and what you've been doing in Israel and with Israel, I think you've got a little movie that you wanted to show, right?
A short clip.
So we have 35 minutes. If you've been to one of my panels, you already know that it's going to be slightly different. We will have time in the end for questions, so if you have any questions, please keep them to the last 2 or 3 minutes. Yotam, tell us a little bit about Telefonica and your role in it.
So before we go to the clip, Telefonica is the third or fourth largest operator in the world, depending on what metric you use. We have 330 million customers across Latin America and Europe. We have a stake in China Unicom. We're the largest shareholder in Telekom Italia. We have over 200 people in Israel as a result of an acquisition that we made there, and about 30 people up in Silicon Valley, which is where I'm based. Within Telefonica, I work for Telefonica Digital, which, as you can see on the screen, our logo is beyond connectivity, which I think answers your question about what do we think is our role in the value chain. Are we going to be a dumb pipe or not? But I'll leave that for later. Telefonica Digital is a part of the company that's driving growth within the company. Our core business is somewhat stagnant like any other operators. Because we are very heavily present in Latin America, we do have some organic growth there. But we're looking for new growth avenues. So we have different services like mobile advertising, financial services, security, etc. I'm responsible for one of those areas, and now if you could roll the clip, you'll see what that area is. Good, so while this clip finishes running, Firefox OS, that's what I do. This is a new mobile phone operating system. It's a pure HTML5 mobile phone operating system that Telefonica Digital has developed in collaboration with Mozilla, the owners of the Firefox brand. We actually collaborate with Mozilla on everything around Firefox, both on the development of the product, the engineering, the experience, OEM relationships, building out the ecosystems, etc. So you can already tell that this is a very atypical telco role in that we have very significant resources dedicating to building a product that really isn't ours. Deutsche Telekom, in fact, is going to be launching this product also. And in order to ensure that other carriers are going to be launching this product, we were very, very cautious not to include any elements that are proprietary Telefonica elements. The platform, I think, is a very impressive web platform that really replicates existing smartphone experiences. I would argue that the most differentiated part of the platform, and that's something that we were very active in bringing and incorporating into this platform, was actually created by an Israeli company called Everything.me. And this is a company we just invested in. Mozilla actually made their first venture investment. Mozilla is a not-for-profit entity. They made their first venture investment in Everything.me also. And that is actually going to be a very, very significant part of the experience that we deliver to our customers. We're going to be launching Firefox OS next month in Colombia, Venezuela, and Spain, and rolling it out later in the year to Brazil and a handful of other countries, and to all of our 25 countries next year.
Can it work for Telefonica? It sounds like you guys are doing great stuff that's beyond what telcos are doing, right?
I think we're certainly trying. I mean, Telefonica Digital has really taken, I think, a revolutionary approach that's since then been replicated by other carriers. So you mentioned Singtel. They created Singtel Digital after us, really modeling it after what we did. Telenor, Scandinavian-based, Norwegian-based operator, did the same thing. So I think we're certainly blazing a path for the industry in terms of how can you try and deliver growth while still managing a very heavy legacy business.
You're not embracing the being just the pipe.
We're certainly not embracing being just a pipe. We're looking at the smart pipe options, which is between service provider and the dumb pipe, which includes primarily carrier billing and other kind of open network APIs, opening up your network for external innovation. And we also have some of our own services, over-the-top services, like ToMe, which is a messaging service, ToGo, which is a service we recently launched in the UK, which basically means what it does is take your phone number and put it in the cloud and enable all kinds of very, very interesting and advanced use cases out of that.
Great, thanks for that, and I'll start bitching about being a telco later. But actually, instead of myself bitching about telcos, I'll let the startup do it. No. I'm not going to let you do that. Gil Dudkiewics is founder and CEO of, right? Yeah. It just says CEO, so. Oh. Of a startup that has the most unique name on earth. It's called StartApp. In Hebrew, actually, it sounds better because we don't have accents, right? So startup and startup sound the same. But in English, it does make sense. So StartApp is a great startup originating out of Israel. You're based in New York right now. Yeah. And to understand a little bit what you do, maybe I should say that monetization, making money in the mobile space has become harder. It's harder for telcos, but it's also hard for developers. And I think what you did is find a very interesting way for application developers to monetize the work that they do. So I'd be happy if you told us a little bit about StartApp, and then I'll ask you about our role as telcos in your world.
So I'll start first that if I'm looking for the reason most people buying phones today, and all of us are buying iPhones and Android, they don't even need to raise the question anymore. All of us buy it because it's cool, our friends has it, but really because it has applications over there. It doesn't change the way that we make any phone calls. Battery may last less, but other than this, it doesn't really improve any of the phone functionality. It really improves the application that we're using. And if you're looking on this, in the ecosystem, you have Google, you have Apple that makes a lot of money, you have all the telcos that are selling the devices and making money, some of them out of it. But the app developers, most of them are not making money. So that's really what we're trying to change. And I'll start from a story that I shared with Guy earlier in the morning. We just met with one of our biggest developers. And the guy has a company of 45 people, has about 6 million downloads per month, lives in India, and makes money from us. And there is no chance in the world that the guy from India could have sold the applications to any of the big telcos otherwise and really make money and really create jobs in places like India, Afghanistan, China, and other places if he had to sell these applications to any of the telcos. But to start with a bit of overview, we are headquartered in Israel, 40 people. We did it with $5.5 million and have today over 750 million downloads, a rate of close to 3 million daily downloads, working with many app developers, over 25,000 of them, to distribute our SDK. We create more than 50 million pages per day, and in terms of search, which is one of the main sources for revenue for us, we have on Android today more searches than Yahoo and Bing combined. We are basically a platform in the center between app developers and the advertisers, have different really offerings. What we are trying to do is not create the in-app advertisement or the banners that people are clicking by mistake, but really come with more innovative product. And that's a nice marketing slide, show that the radio took 38 years to reach 50 million users, the TV 13, and we got it in 6 months. But really, it's not, the execution or the people that we have, which are great people and great execution. It's really the need in the marketplace. You really look on app developers today, and the vast majority of them are not making any money. And that's the reason they're adapting our model very, very fast. You can look on the hockey stick of the accumulated download. It really works. We work with most of the big partners. Obviously, you see only one of the top 5 search companies that are missing on our slide because they are the ones that are making the money otherwise. So they have no motivation or incentive for us to really do what we do.
So we have a joint enemy, finally.
I don't have enemies. We are working with everyone, try to work with anyone, but yeah, they are not excited about us taking a couple of percentage of their searches in the marketplace and really solve some of the ecosystem. You can see Comscore that we have Search Mobile Online is our brand. We have more searches than Yahoo and Bing combined over there. And I'm using your startup. You're using only what I'm getting for free. And that's in summary what we do, really trying to change the ecosystem in the marketplace today.
So just a quick follow-up question, and again, I'm trying to play the operator here, though I was a venture capitalist before, and had I been in venture capital, I would definitely consider investing in startup. But do you see operators, telcos, carriers as being relevant to your business at all?
Yeah, I do, because there are things that we do that they have harder time to do. We know the search, we know users in consumption much better than they know. So our ability to do different recommendations to users, different know-how of what the users are actually doing is much better than many of them. However, I'm admitting that whenever we get a lead, so-called, with an operator, I'm telling my CTO, if you want it, go ahead. I'm tired of trying to fight this fight.
Yeah, well, that's being realistic. Actually, I met one of the largest venture firms in the world, Sequoia, and they practically instruct their entrepreneurs, their portfolio companies, not to engage with operators. Well, unless that's exactly the line of business they're at. But typically, they would not invest and would not encourage their entrepreneurs to work with operators. Do you share that sentiment, Howard, being very experienced and...
Well, we do share that sentiment in that most deals with operators take very long periods of time to get done. There are big bureaucracies in the old-fashioned sense. Verizon Wireless is a wonderful company, but trying to do it, we've done deals with them in the early 2000 period when you had to get everything on deck. Now, once Apple changed the world with the App Store, trying to do a deal with a carrier and take a year and a half for an early startup when 6 more competitors will have products in the App Store that do what you're trying to get the carrier to do has not been very efficient. The best that most carriers can do for us is to put our preload apps on the phone. And we'll do that, but we'll also have those apps available first, because otherwise it just takes too long.
Right, and you've made, since 2005, when you started first round capital, you've made 240 investments, is that right?
We've made about 240 investments. It goes up every week because we do 30, 35 a year. We just had a partners meeting this morning, and we turned down a company, so we didn't add this today, but last week we added one. And we've got about 180 still in the community. We don't even call it a portfolio because we've built a community of the founders and the CTOs and the CMOs in these companies who can help one another do things. And so the companies work together, they answer questions for one another about technology, so that it's a model that's slightly different than most venture firms. Usually the partner is the human router. If you have a question, you want to contact, you call the partner and you say, can you connect me with XYZ? In our community, you go out to the community on our first round network and you say, I'm having a problem with X, and 5 CEOs will answer you in the next hour and say, oh, I know these 3 people you can connect with. Now, we also answer them too, and we help a lot. But it lets us magnify the efforts of all of the companies. Companies like Flurry, which provide the analytics for most mobile apps that are out there.
So a question on your community rather than portfolio. The total market size, Telecom's equipment and services, is about 30% of the total IT market. That would mean that you should have 30% of your portfolio in mobile or communications. Does that ratio hold? And if not, why not?
Well, I think we require every company that's talking to us to tell us their mobile strategy. I mean, there's 1.5 mobile phones now. There'll be 5 billion smartphones in the next few years. So you have to assume that most of whatever you're going to deliver, whatever service it is, whatever product it is going to be bought on a smartphone. Fab.com, one of our biggest e-commerce success stories, finds that people using smartphones or tablets buy 4 times as much as people buying on the web. So we do expect mobile to be part of everything we do. So not just 30%, but 90%. But mobile-focused companies are a lot fewer, and probably in our portfolio, 15 or 20% now, but growing.
And why is that? Why do you not invest in mobile more than you've done?
Well, it's all a question of what we see and when we see it, and that kind of thing. But we've got things like Message Me, which is growing very rapidly right now, or which over-the-top messaging, or Path.com, which is very focused on mobile. And so we've done a lot of them, and they're growing very well. It's just that we also see a lot of opportunities in e-commerce. So Fab.com wasn't a mobile investment, even though mobile is critical to its success. So it's a sort of a question of how you define things for us.
Right. So going back to you, Yotam, new ways to make money, new ways to grow. Apple and Google and the app environment, they're eating up our breakfast and lunch and soon dinner. What can we operators do in order to stop that and maybe reverse that?
So maybe let me just touch for a second on the issue of the reluctance to work with operators, and then I'll address that, because I have to say I completely understand the reluctance. I've heard it from many venture capital firms, I've seen companies go bankrupt because they focus too much on working with carriers or other large bureaucratic organizations. But let me tell you this, until about 2 years ago that we acquired Deutsche, I believe I was the only Israeli out of Telefonica's 250,000 employees. You could find my name just by typing the first 2 letters of my name on the email system, which means that I would get approached by every Israeli entrepreneur who wanted to sell to a telco. So I've seen what works, what doesn't. And let me just tell you, I think the prize is huge if you get it right. The way to get it right is focus on your point of entry. Don't aim too broad. These companies, Telefonica, 25 countries. If you can get a deployment in Ecuador or in Peru, I know it looks like a small market. Make that your case study and then export it outside. Have a champion within the company that is not a CSO or a global CMO. Have a champion that has the liberty to make a decision about the budget required for your deployment in that country. That's what you need. Make it not global, make it local, make it work, and then you can roll it out across large company groups. And talk to Zohar. We saw him yesterday talking about his big exit. We invested in this company. We deployed it in our countries, and that certainly contributed to his very large and successful sale later on to Singtel. So absolutely understand the challenges, but I think there's a lot to be done there. As far as monetization, it might seem odd to people that we're launching Firefox OS in Colombia, Venezuela, Brazil, Spain. Not typically where you'd launch a cutting-edge technological platform, which this absolutely is. The reason for that is that we perceive that this is just one example of many where more advanced markets do not offer the best opportunity. So look at Microsoft trying to launch Windows Mobile for years now with $2 billion a year spent on marketing alone, and very, very little to show for it. It's very, very hard to address advanced markets with robust ecosystems, with high buying power, and very high credit card penetration. You go outside of these markets, you go to Latin America, you go to Asia, you'll find completely different dynamics that open up huge opportunities. And US companies tend to think about the US, so international companies really have the opportunity to address those markets. In our case, you're looking at how do you monetize apps. Well, monetizing apps in Latin America is very hard because less than 10% of the population have credit cards or even bank accounts. But almost 100% have mobile phones. Enable carrier billing, and you've just unlocked another 90% of the market that wasn't available to you before. So if you're capable of thinking in terms of the dynamics of countries like Brazil, China is very hard, but there's other countries, in general, just Latin America and emerging countries, there is a massive opportunity to be done there, to be captured there.
I think, by the way, that's great advice. We have done a little bit with Brazil, and we definitely, the fact that the whole payment mechanism in Brazil is around either carrier billing or giving people minutes, which there's a robust economy in minutes there, is quite interesting. It doesn't always translate as easily back to the US, but I think it's a great way to prove that an application is important. So I think that advice is good advice.
Does it necessarily have to translate back into the US, or will you consider investing in companies that focus on emerging markets as their main strategy?
We've looked very carefully, particularly at payments and remittances, where the emerging markets are the place where the money has to go to, but it comes from often the US or the developed world. And so we can do some of that. Because First Round is so focused in the US, we've done a few investments in Israeli companies, but we want them to have a US presence just so that we feel we can actually help them, because we want to provide more than just capital to companies. We want to provide real help.
That's great. So Gil, you mentioned this Indian developer before that you were empowering and basically giving an ability to do something that otherwise you would not have been able to do. How many of your developers in the developer community come outside of this bubble of the US and maybe Europe?
So I think most of the developers are actually outside of the US. I don't have the numbers on my top of my head, but I would say at least 70 or 80% of them are outside of the US. Though the application that they develop are downloaded all around the world. So US is number one still in terms of number of downloads, and UK and Korea are number 2 and 3. So there is totally difference between where they actually develop the applications versus where they actually distribute it. Big difference.
And you guys make your living mostly from advertising, right? I mean, what you embed in those applications is basically ads. Is that correct?
Only ads. Different types of ads. Search is one of them. Exit ads, different type of advertisement. All of what we are making money is from advertisement.
So instead of doing a show of hands, because I know where my hand is going to be, how tolerant are customers to advertising in their applications and services?
So if you ask users, generally speaking, they prefer it free and without any advertisement. So that's choice number one. Choice number 3...
Healthy and rich, you mean, yeah.
Choice number 3 is paying for the application.
Right.
And the conversion for it is way less than 1% on generally speaking.
We know that.
So the option 2, there is different versions of it in a way. And what we are really trying to do is have the advertisement not to interfere with the user experience, and that's important. You have many types of advertisement today that you get a banner inside a game and you click what caused the fat finger syndrome. You click on it by mistake without even the intention of it. So we're really trying to avoid it and try to put the advertisement when someone leaves the application or totally external of the application, when the user actually may look on it and it doesn't disturb him when he's playing. And we get very good feedback from the marketplace on it.
I think it's also important to target. So Uber Media, which is an LA company, but also has some technology people in Israel, has now just launched a really good mobile targeting so that the ads people see are more relevant. They're not just random game things and so on. And that makes users more tolerant. If ads are relevant, users are more tolerant. I completely agree with the sequence that people want. Free and ad-free is what we all want.
If Nagraj, who's the original moderator of this panel, would have been moderating it, he would have asked me probably what I see as the future trends and the things that we're going to be doing as carriers, as operators in the next 5 years. Now, I didn't bother preparing an answer to that one because I know Yotam is going to have a better answer, right? So what do you see as the future of Telefonica and maybe the future of the industry in terms of monetization and services?
Well, as mentioned before, we do believe with our ability or in our ability to deploy over-the-top services. And we've literally launched over-the-top services that we deploy through the various app stores. For us, Firefox OS has the added value of being a very open platform, and not just in that it's open source, but that the commercial models are open, which allows us to deploy, and other publishers, to deploy their own services straight to the client without having Google or Apple as a gatekeeper in between. So I think what we did as an example with a service like ToMe. ToMe is essentially a kind of a marriage between WhatsApp and Path. It's an over-the-top communication service. Or what we did with the acquisition of Jaja, which seemed odd to some people. Jaja was an Israeli company, voice over IP, that we acquired. Why would you acquire a service that is destructing value or destroying value in your core business? Well, the reluctance to destroy value in the core business is what kills us, because inevitably others will destroy value if we don't. So we do believe in competing with ourselves. We deploy services, our own services and partner services, that theoretically might destroy value, but we believe in the long term create value for our customers and by extension to us.
Right. Now, we typically, when we talk about the future, we talk about cloud computing, we talk about big data, all topics that we've heard of in the last 2 days. Do you do any of that? Do you engage in any activities around that, or are you focusing on delivering mobile services?
We do. Telefonica Digital has a big data area. It has a cloud computing area that we manage through an investment in a company called Jasper that we made up in Northern California. In big data, we've deployed a service called Smart Steps in the UK, which essentially maps foot traffic. We know where these people are coming from because we have the billing relationship, which is our biggest asset probably. So we map foot traffic through the phone number. We know where they're coming from, and retailers know where to put up stores and how to optimize essentially the deployment of a retail network through the leveraging of our data. In telco, generally you have the hindrance that you're a very regulated industry. So in order to use customer data, it always needs to be opt-in, which is a big challenge that we have and some of the other companies in the internet space don't have. But as long as you anonymize the data, which is what we're doing in big data, that issue is resolved.
Great. So we have 2 more minutes. Are there any questions? Anyone who wants to ask a question? Guy on front, yeah.
You guys spoke a little bit about the smart pipe, and there's a lot of ideas, especially with having access to billing.
Right. So since you don't have a mic, I'll just repeat the question. The smart pipe. What do we think about the smart pipe, right?
Well, I was wondering if there's any ideas about leveraging the actual pipe itself.
Leveraging the actual pipe itself, the data pipe. Howard, or?
Could you explain the question? I mean, what we do is, in Telefonica, we have a program called Blue Via, which is our open API program, where we're going, we'll prioritize APIs and then we just open them up for developers. So whether it's messaging, whether it's billing, location, etc. So any network API. And that allows developers, or will allow developers, when they're fully open, to innovate based on our networks, given that we know that as large companies, by definition, we can't innovate always as fast.
So what are some of the most promising scenarios and use cases?
Well, I have to say, first of all, this is I do not manage Blue Via, so it's hard for me to answer for them. But billing is by far and away the most valuable one. There's no doubt about that. And certainly we're focusing a lot on that. What we've been focusing a lot on is when we open other APIs, try to do it in different ways than other telcos have. So in messaging, for example, messaging APIs have existed forever. SMS aggregators use them. But we've flipped the model on its head. We do a customer pays model, not a developer pays model. So you can access our SMS API, initiate SMS messages, but they go against customers' phone bills, and then the developer gets a revenue share, rather than asking the developer to acquire 500,000, bundles of 500,000 SMS messages and then try to monetize them by themselves, which works for the short tail but not for the long tail. So we focus a lot on finding the right business model. But in general, I think that open networks needs to happen from somewhat of an industry perspective, because nobody's going to develop for 250 separate or 350 separate billing APIs for each telco. So we do need to kind of consolidate that more.
Great. I'm afraid we're out of time, but the three gentlemen on stage are going to be available immediately after, whenever this session is over. The next question for me would have been tips and tricks for entrepreneurs trying to make their way through this industry. So Howard, Gil, and Yotam are going to be available for any of your questions now, afterwards and after lunch. So with that, I'd like to thank you all for listening in, and see you all in the next Israel conference, if not before. Thank you.